Southern thinkers and leaders addressed the topic of white equality in the 1800s. Their position was clear. The whites were the superiors and the blacks the inferiors. Thus saith the law and the Lord, according to them. And in this commentary, we're going to hear some of the words they wrote down to justify their position in the eyes of the public and to maintain the social order and unity amongst the whites, right? And it's very important to understand this history because it gives some insight on why many people who call themselves white and black think and act in a certain way towards the other party, right? Till today. And so let's open up the book right here. It's called The Black Image in the White Mind by Dr. George M. Fredrickson. And we're going to turn to page 61, where he writes this.
Your fathers and my fathers built this government on two ideas.
Speaking here is William L. Yancey, an 1800s prominent pro-slavery politician and journalist from the South. And he addressed a Northern audience in 1860 by telling them this.
Your fathers and my fathers built this government on two ideas.
The fathers of most white Americans in the 1800s were the English colonizers from the 1600s, right? Those were their ancestors. That's the bloodline they came from before they dropped the English identity and replaced it with being white people. Those early fathers built the government on two main ideas. And what is an idea? An idea is a construct of the mind, right? It's an abstract or an intangible representation of some concept. And in this situation, there are two of these ideas that lay the foundation of this government, right? Here we go.
The first is that the white race is the citizen and the master race, and the white man is the equal of every other white man.
That's the first idea that was constructed in the mind of their fathers. First, it was the concept invented by the Europeans called race, which attempts to convince people that they should be lumped together as one people just because they share some similar physical features. And it ignores all the other obvious cultural differences that people have. And it just focuses solely on physical features, right? And there's a reason behind that. And within this idea, race establishes people lumped together in the white category as the citizens and the master race, or the people who are supposed to rule over all others that are not lumped together in the white racial category, right? So pay attention to what he's saying because he knows what he's talking about and he's giving out the game. So again, the white man is equal to other whites in this idea created by their fathers. And in their mind, they envisioned the whites as the master race above everyone else, right? This is part of the first idea. Now, what about the second?
The second idea is that the Negro is the inferior race.
Negro, which means black, is the name assigned to people who had any recognizable recent African ancestry. And also in other situations, the Europeans tagged other people with that same label as a symbol of an inferior status within a society, right? These are colonial brands which represent the inferior people within a society, which is why Lancey stated that the second idea is that the Negro is the inferior race. And almost 200 years later, when we lift up our eyes and we look out into American society, we see the manifestation of this idea, right? The people who view themselves as black are at the bottom, and the people who call themselves white are psychologically sitting on top of them. And so their fathers envisioned this nearly 400 years ago as the foundation of the society, just as he mentioned. And their vision and idea, which translated into a concrete reality, is what is known as magic. Understand that and let it sink in. Now let's get some more. In the same year, a writer in the Southern Literary Messenger made a similar point in an historical analysis of slavery. Unlike the paternalist, he condemned ancient slavery and medieval serfdom in principle, because under such systems,
races richly endowed by nature and designed for high and lofty purposes were kept from rising to their natural level.
What he's referring to are slaves from the European stock. He's extending his current ideas about a white race onto the Greeks and the Romans, who had no such identity for themselves, right? But they were slaves just like everyone else at one time. And his argument is that they were designed to be superior people, and they had no business being slaves because that position held them back from reaching their natural potential. Let's keep going. But all forms of white servitude and subordination had fallen before
the progress of truth, justice, and Christianity.
I think here he's arguing that servitude by those he retroactively names white was a prerequisite of truth, justice, and the spread of Christianity. And it's almost as if he's saying that none of those ideas or philosophies could have possibly prospered if whites remained as slaves, or basically no one else had the natural potential to propagate those ideas and philosophies around the world, which is why it was necessary for the whites to be excluded from slavery, right? This is what it appears that he's saying to me. Now watch this. Negro slavery, on the other hand, had persisted because it was not really incompatible with the growth of liberty and equality. It was fine to keep those they called Negroes as slaves because they weren't designed to experience liberty and equality. They were meant to be slaves or at the feet of everyone else, especially the whites. So, unlike the whites who needed to be excluded from slavery so they could embody the ideas of freedom and equality, the blacks had no such potential to manifest these concepts, which is why the author notes that Negro slavery was not incompatible with growth of liberty and equality, right? This is what this is talking about. Now let's keep going. Southerners often went further and contended that Negro slavery was not only compatible with white equality, but was the very foundation of it. That's because blackness was used as a backdrop to understanding whiteness. Black inequality made white equality obvious and apparent, just like poverty creates a similar backdrop for understanding wealth. So the author says that the white Southerners basically understood black servitude as the foundation of white equality. So the concept of equality mentioned earlier wasn't referring to world equality, right? It referred to white equality, which many whites understood to belong exclusively to them, right? And so this is part of white consciousness, and it's what makes this consciousness potentially dangerous in people who are in position of power, right? Let's keep reading. Governor Henry A. Wise of Virginia contended that true equality could exist among whites only where black servitude existed.
Break down slavery,
He argued,
and you would with the same blow destroy the great democratic principle of equality among men.
and he's obviously talking about white men, and literally white men, because the women were not equal in the eyes of the law or the Lord from their perspective. The claim was frequently made that the white South had no recognized social classes, that far from establishing an aristocracy of slaveholders, as the abolitionists claimed, it put all white men, whether they owned slaves or not, on a dead level, meaning on the same level. This was one of the major ways the elite were able to get the poor whites to buy into their game of domination. It was through intangible social benefits, right? It allowed the poor whites to get as high as they wanted to off of whiteness and feel a sense of superiority and feel as if they were just as accomplished as the elite whites, right? It was a very effective strategy on the behalf of the elites, right? These people were very intelligent people when it came to doing this stuff, right? Here we go. Thomas R.R. Cobb described the lower class whites of the South as having the sense of belonging
to an elevated class. It matters not that he is no slaveholder. He is not of the inferior race. He is a freeborn citizen. The poorest meets the richest as an equal, sits at the table with him, salutes him as a neighbor, meets him at a public assembly, and stands on the same social platform.
You see that? It was a brilliant strategy, and it was a very effective way to neutralize the poor whites from becoming a threat, right? They could get high all day and all night off of whiteness and be happy that they were not a member of the inferior race, right? I know it hit for a lot of them. It hit for a lot of them, guaranteed, right? Now let's keep reading. In the 1853 pamphlet version of his Negroes and Negro Slavery, which carried on the cover the enthusiastic endorsements of Jefferson Davis, J.D.B. DeBow, and other prominent Southern spokesmen, Van Every combined arguments for the biological inequality of the blacks with a vigorous attack on all past or present forms of class privilege and social hierarchy within homogeneous white societies. He denounced with particular emphasis the oppression of British peasants and laborers by an aristocracy that was not naturally superior to those it governed. He's referring to the British elites oppressing the British peasants. And he disagreed with this because in his eyes it was a white-on-white situation, which went against his beliefs about the natural social order. And why is that? Because of what we read earlier about the ideas of whites being equal to other whites. And so he saw this kind of class-based oppression as unnatural and a violation of white equality, which went against the rules of the game. Let's keep going. Having condemned all forms of subordination of whites to other whites as artificial and unjust, Van Every then relegated the blacks to abject and perpetual servitude for one reason alone, because they constituted a permanently inferior biological species. Now, when the biological aspect is applied to this argument, it implies created by nature, God, Jesus, Zeus, Allah, aliens, or whatever else you want to insert into the creation process as making them that way from the jump, right? Which also means that nothing could be done to fix it. And if nothing could be done to fix this supposed inferiority, then what is being hinted at by these people at this time? That's right, you guessed it. To keep them enslaved, right? That's what they would have been suggesting by this, right? Let's keep going. He even attacked those pro-slavery writers who attempted
to defend Southern institutions by comparing the condition of the Negro with the condition of the British laborer, because no comparison is allowable or possible. The Negro is governed by those naturally superior, and is in the best condition of any portion or branch of his race, while the British laborer, governed by those naturally his equals and even sometimes his inferiors, is in the worst condition of any portion of his race. The first is secure in all the rights that nature gives him.
The first refers to blacks. He's essentially saying that they're in the position that they're supposed to be in as inferiors, and they're playing the role that they were supposedly designed to play.
The latter is practically denied all or nearly all of his.
The latter is the whites, who in a state of subjugation are denied their supposed natural right of being self-governing people and on the same social status of others called whites, right? So to him, it's within the natural order to keep the blacks subjugated because that's the position they were designed to be in. But it's out of line to do that with the whites because they were created to rule over themselves and to rule over other people. Understand, and let's keep going.
The first is protected and provided for by those the Creator has designed should govern him. The latter is kept in ignorance, brutalized, overworked, and plundered by those who it is designed should only govern themselves. One is a normal condition, the other an infamous usurpation.
You see that? This is what they're talking about. The most famous and authoritative statement of the principle that hierarchical subordination should always be strictly reserved for inferior races appeared in Alexander H. Stevens's famous Cornerstone speech of 1861, heralding the foundation of the Confederacy.
Many governments,
said the newly elected Vice President of the Confederate States of America,
have been founded on the principles of subordination and serfdom of certain classes of the same race. Such were and are in violation of the laws of nature. Our system commits no such violation of nature's laws. With us, all the white race, however high or low, rich or poor, are equal in the eyes of the law. Not so with the Negro. Subordination is his place. He by nature, or by the curse against Canaan, is fitted for that condition which he occupies in our system.
Our system. Look at what he's saying. The entire social system was carefully constructed by people who had an intention of labeling people as races and placing them in hierarchies, right? Whites at the top, blacks at the bottom, right? And it's going to stay that way as long as people continue to think and to speak about themselves in terms that reflect his system, right? I mean, these people are telling you what it is. It's just a matter of who can read between the lines and do something about it, right? Other than that, the story will continue as the blacks being subordinate and the subjects in their system, right? Let's finish up. As for the basis of the new Confederate government,
its foundations are laid. Its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural or normal condition.
Right? That's part of their system, and it continueth today. And it's going to continue as long as people think and behave in terms that reflect the fundamental ideas of their system, right? And it's not going to change until people do something about it right here, today, in today's time. And so the primary objective is to first decolonize the mind, right? And to make the transition over to the other side. But understand, there be few that find their way on this path. So I want you to think about this as we continue the journey out of the pit. And so right now, what I want to do is I want to thank you for watching all the way into the end. My name is Brooklyn St. Michael, and I'll see you in the free world.